8 years ago is when I first reached out to Brian to come and do a Books and Brews. And I had this incredible thing arrive in my store, which was a package filled with baked goods. And I just said, Matt, this is going to be the best conversation ever. I was just floored. And unfortunately, we had to reschedule that one. And we're here 8 years later. So I am super excited to host you, Brian. I just want to say a few things for those who don't know your reputation.
A few things.
I make some notes when I read these books. So I have so many questions I'm so excited about tonight, and I will pause. So be thinking about your questions. That's what this is about, is a conversation with you all. And we do have books available, a great thing to take home with you too. Beyond the cake. You get that, the YouTube people do not. Sorry. Brian Noyes, he was formerly the art director and the writer for the Washington Post and the Smithsonian, is the founder of America's favorite rural bakery, the Red Chuck Bakery in Virginia, which opened in 2009. Many of you all have visited. I've talked to you in Warrenton or Marshall, and breathed new life into a Main Street community. I just want to say a few of your honors, Brian, that they've received include Southern Living gave their rum cake, which is the cake we're eating tonight, a 2018 Food Award, and in 2021 named them as one of the South's best bakeries. Food and Wine named their peanut pie the best pie in the state of Virginia. Garden and Gun gave their sweet potato bourbon pecan pie Made in the South award honor. Parade Magazine chose their Shenandoah apple cake. Here we are in Winchester, right? To represent the Commonwealth of Virginia in their roundup of the best food items in each of the 50 states. And Washingtonian Magazine, in a blind taste test, they weren't biased towards you at all, named their pumpkin pie the best in DC. And they're 50 miles away. So I think that's pretty amazing. Let's give a hand for Brian Noyes. Of course, he's here tonight to talk about his most current cookbook, the Farmtown, or it's sitting here before us, Red Truck Bakery Farmhouse Cookbook, as well as his prior cookbook, Red Truck Bakery Cookbook. And we might get, as you can see from the sign over here, some hints on the opening of the new bakery restaurant, Hayfields, in Little Washington. So very excited about that.
Breaking news.
You all will hear it first. So thank you for coming.
You bet. And thanks for all that. Thanks for making up all those honors. Let me have that list.
I can see the faces eating the rum cake, so I don't think that anything is made up. I want to just start at the beginning of really, how do you go from an art director for publications for the Washington Post and Smithsonian and take a second career as starting to bake and then actually starting a bakery in rural America?
Kind of crazy, huh? Well, I grew up in California. I'm a fifth generation Monterey guy. And my dad was in newspapers and I didn't know anything but that. My mom wasn't a great cook, so I didn't follow after her. I ended up designing newspapers and then magazines and worked for a city magazine company that had properties all over the U.S. And I was in Tampa, Detroit, and Houston. And then Ben Bradley called me up and got me to Washington, D.C. as they were getting ready to launch a Sunday magazine. So I became the art director of the Washington Post magazine. I was there for a number of years. I went up to New York for a year to be art director of House and Garden at Condé Nast. Hated living in New York. Moved back to DC, became the art director of Architecture and Preservation magazines, and then went back to the Washington Post for another long hitch, and started thinking about what I want to do. Is it always going to be newspapers, or should I follow my passion to open up a little food joint somewhere? And I started going through schooling at the CIA, Culinary Institute of America. There's an alumni here, and we were talking. The other CIA, I always have to say that in DC. And I went back several times. I learned a lot. I went through culinary training at the l'Académie des Cuisines outside of DC, which luckily was started by two former White House pastry chefs. So I learned so much there. And then the CIA sponsored a trip where I went down to Oaxaca, Mexico, and trained with Rick Bayless of several Mexican restaurants in Chicago, in a former convent in Oaxaca. And I just love making that kind of food, almost as much as I love eating that food. So anyway, that kind of tantalized me with a whole nother career path. And I hit 50 and I thought, boy, if I'm ever going to do something on my own, I better think about doing that now. So in the meantime, I then became the art director of Smithsonian Magazine. And I don't think it was quite fair to everybody there, because I sure had a bakery in my sights. And Dwight and I, that's Dwight over there, and he and I lived in Arlington. We bought a farmhouse in Fauquier County in Orleans, Virginia, which I say is out in the boonies, which the people of Orleans don't like hearing that. But it's, as an art director with a nice little white farmhouse and farmland, I thought, what this thing needs is an old red truck parked out front. So, I was online surfing the net while I should have been designing Smithsonian Magazine, and I found this auto sports company in New York that had just a cherry 1954 red pickup truck for sale. And I became the interested buyer, and they turned me over to the anonymous seller, who turned out to be Tommy Hilfiger. And he sent that down from his farm in Connecticut down to our house in Arlington, and I loaded it up with garden tools and drove it out to the farm. And on Friday nights, I'd leave Smithsonian Magazine a little early. I'd come out here to the farmhouse, and I'd start baking out of the rickety little oven there, and took things like the rum cake and granola and quiche to a little country store 1 mile away as the crow flies. And I got there early in the morning, unlocked the door, emptied out whatever I made, breads, granola, the quiche, several kinds of pies and cakes and muffins, and just stacked them up on the table and let the woman who owned the shop ring it up. But I was standing around talking about what I just made. So never really advertised it. It was just Saturday mornings, and it caught on. And the next weekend I went out there, and things were gone within 20 minutes. And this was double the amount of the previous week. The third week I'd show up still early, maybe 7 a.m. They don't open till 9:30 or something. And the parking lot was filled with cars, not waiting to go into the store, but waiting to grab whatever was in the truck before it went into the store. There was a picnic being held in the town of Little Washington I heard about, and two of the hosts came up and bought several items and took them to their house. I didn't know how it went until the phone rang midweek, and a woman said, "Hi, I'm Marion Burroughs, the food writer for the New York Times, and I'd like to do a little story on you and your little red truck bakery." And I thought, "Is that okay?" she said. My only response in my head was, "Duh." And I said, "Sure, let's talk." And she wrote a piece that came out on a Wednesday in the first week of December on the front page of the New York Times food section. And my little tiny website that had 24 visits on Tuesday, the next day had 57,000 hits. And Dwight stayed home. We made whatever people needed to order right that minute that they had never even known about the day before, and then packed it up, shipped it off. The mailman backed his truck down our driveway and scratched his head, all the packages that were sitting out on the front porch. And I was too tired to laugh and just said, man, that's just not what fit in the house. And so all these things got shipped out and everybody was pretty happy. And it led me to giving notice at Smithsonian Magazine. And I signed a lease on a little gas station in at the county seat of Warrenton in Fauquier County, right next to the courthouse, which was great because it was the only building in that whole stretch that had its own parking lot. And right at the top of the hill, you could come up, see the courthouse. To the left and to the right, there's my red trucks in there. And it's hasn't been the same since.
That doesn't sound like a slow growth. It sounds a little exciting that first day and thinking about oven space and all of the things.
Yeah, I had to think about that eventually, didn't I? I'm not a great planner, but it just kind of happens.
Yeah.
But one thing I need to say was, of course, we opened up. I hired 3 staffers and me in an old 1921 Esso service station, and we were doing pretty good. And then the Great Recession hit, so it was just months into it, and then we got a little nervous, and I had some sleepless nights, and we were doing the best we could.
That I was going to ask you really what, for those of us who may have been in food service or done things like this or take that leap, what was the hardest part about and having it doing it in a rural community? Did that impact it more? And really, what was the best moment or part?
Well, I'll still talk about the early days. I had 2 prospective investors in our little farm town who I came up with a bogus business plan. And we finally had this get together where we were going to talk about, the check. And that's when they just dressed me down and said, this is a bonehead idea. It's just pie in the sky. And yeah, literally. And we want no part of this thing. This is the guy who told me that, hey, you have to name all your sandwiches after Civil War generals, which at the time sounded halfway feasible, but I'm sure glad that didn't happen. And then another thought of his was cupcakes. Nobody eats cupcakes. And of course, that turned into a thing. And there was one other thing that probably is best left unsaid, only because I can't remember it. But then, so it was just me doing it. So I emptied out my savings and did it on my own. So that was the worst part, probably. Best part was we survived, and the turning point for us. It was a rough couple months. Luckily, people still need pumpkin pies at Thanksgiving, so there were lines out the doors and orders way ahead, and so that got us through. We had a huge snowstorm of over 3 feet that just shut down everything, but I was determined to be open because when those kind of storms hit Warrenton, everybody in the outlying area loses power, but the town usually keeps power, so we became the warming center and free coffee, and yes, our restrooms work, and you can charge your phones here, and so that was great to get going. So Southern Living came by and did a little piece on us. They did a story on antiquing in the Shenandoah Valley, and a nice little sidebar was about where to go eat, and we were kind of the main story. And then people showed up with that magazine, and then left with pies, and then went down to all our little merchants on Main Street in Warrenton and carrying all that stuff, so they knew that this little bakery kind of was helping everybody else on the street along. So at some point, shipping just went crazy. We ran out of space. I knew we needed a second location. So how many of you have been to our Marshall store? Yeah, good.
There's nothing I don't like.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Well, good. That was me. So we looked for locations. A big city developer who had property on Main Street in Little Washington wanted to get us there, and they were too small. I knew that if we opened a second location, it had to be our main location. It couldn't be just even a smaller satellite. I needed room for wrapping everything that went out with the Postal Service and UPS, and I said no to that, although I love that little town. And so I found a place in Marshall right off of 66, an old pharmacy with a Masonic lodge above it and a little kind of newsstand sweet shop next door to it. Now they're conjoined buildings. That sweet shop turned out to be a little secret tavern in the back in the day, I heard. But it was deserted. It was grimy. I don't think anybody had changed that or cleaned that shag carpeting in decades. And the only thing remaining in there were off-track betting machines all the way down the hall to the restrooms. So Dwight's an architect. He did a number on that place, and it looks beautiful.
You had a different approach than sort of the norm in terms of so many things, but to take a historic space and to do it in a Main Street community and in the locations that you chose, it's not necessarily the definition of economic development.
Well,
strategies.
I spent a number of years at the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I was the art director of Preservation Magazine, and it got drummed in my head that you have to save old buildings, and I was already into that because that's why I wanted to work there. So it was great. First, this old 1921 SO service station, and then this pharmacy, Masonic Lodge, and secret tavern. It was great, but on Main Street in Marshall, nothing was open. Everything was for sale. Everything had for rent or for sale signs. I think there was a pizza place open, the post office, and down at the end of the street, the only red light in town was a Ford dealer that had been there 100 years, and the longest surviving Ford dealer in the country, which I think probably means the world. And then they closed like 2 years later. And then this big family-run IGA grocery store 2 doors down the other way celebrated their 50th birthday, and the next week they shut down. And next door to us was a 2-story bank, the largest building in greater downtown Marshall. And it had been vacant so long that the for sale sign had fallen over into the weeds. So, did I let that bother me? Did I even think about it? No. I knew that if we put a food this exit sign out on 66, that might be all we need. Plus, I had a following, and they would come up that way. So we opened. There was a line out the door. We were surprised. I asked this woman in line, like, why are you here? I mean, I want to hear what she said. And she was from your neck of the woods. And she lived in Upperville next to Middleburg. And she said, look, our kids come down here to school. I got to go to the bank. I need to go somewhere else without them, and you're it. And she would always get her friends together, and they showed up. And so, it just gradually built up. A woman who had a store in Middleburg saw what was going on and came to town and bought the bank building right next door to us. And she opened a bakery right next door to us. She opened a butcher shop, and we just now had one moving in across the street, and a farm-to-table restaurant, and that was the restaurant right across the street from us. So the 3 businesses that had started there, now we're going to get pushed out by this woman who put all that stuff under one roof right next to us. So we were scared. But the town was buzzing. It just, once she opened, it was our busiest day for everybody. So I'm a firm believer in a rising tide lifts all boats. And so everything soon became occupied, fixed up, bustling. VDOT and the county came in and they took all the power lines down and underground. No more big, ugly power poles, brick sidewalks, trees. Became a mini Winchester. All these, for better, for worse, all these housing developments came in on the other side, both sides of Main Street behind the buildings. And like, oh, yeah, look what we started.
It's impressive. I mean, I'm not surprised that every small town doesn't come at you and say, come on, please start a bakery, because there's a lot of main streets that could use that. And it's brave to stay in it and to see what comes.
Yeah, it's a catalyst for sure. And I mean, I should go to the CIA and like tell this story. And
we all need good food, right?
We all need bakers to make good food and open restaurants and cafes.
Right. So how did you have some fans that are pretty famous, from Barack Obama to Oprah Winfrey to governors to famous chefs that you spotlight throughout the Farmhouse Cookbook. And your stories are amazing. It's really what kind of, it's so much fun to read. On top of it, you get starving while you're reading it.
Yeah, I'm a storyteller. Have you noticed?
It's a great story. But how did you get the attention of those folks? Like an example.
Okay, so all this was an answer to your question of the worst thing and the best thing.
Yes.
So the best thing was that the first Christmas that we were open with both stores, and I didn't have 3 employees, I had 60 employees, and we were shipping thousands of things nationwide. We now had 2 stores producing Christmas items, shipping everything we can imagine across the country. And at 3:00 on Christmas Eve, we locked the door, and I just looked at everybody, and they looked at me like, what just happened? And I said, okay, you're off for 2 weeks. We're not opening up till the middle of, or second week of January. Thank you very much. And then I sat down, I wrote a note to Obama and just saying, you know, I opened up, it was a stupid thought. You know, we stuck with you when the Great Recession hit, when it would have been easier to close. We went from 3 employees to 62 locations, thousands of things nationwide, blah, blah, blah. And I mailed it at that post office across the street. I forgot all about it. And so we, you know, in the meantime, we're back to cleaning up the mess and ordering supplies and ingredients because we were out of everything. There was another reason I closed for 2 weeks, was we had no energy and no ingredients. And then we had a busy Valentine's Day. I went home. My birthday was the next day. I didn't want to be there all day. And my store manager called and said, some guy just came by with a big envelope from the White House. And I said, well, put it on my desk. I'll see it on Monday. And so there it was, a big unfolded note on Oval Office letterhead, and from the big guy thanking me for my note and the acknowledgement I gave him for, you know, us sticking with him as the Great Recession needed some wrangling. And then the phone rang, and this guy says, hi, I'm Cody Keenan. I'm Obama's chief speechwriter. I'm the guy that dropped off the letter from the big guy. And I was on my way to the Inn at Little Washington to with my fiance for Valentine's Day. And we knew we were driving by your bakery, so instead of just mailing the letter, we thought we'd bring it. Plus, I wanted to bring home a little something for my staff and a pie for the president. And I grabbed him a pecan pie. I said, oh, thank you very much for solving that mystery. But what you should have done was get a sweet potato bourbon pecan pie in front of him. And He said, just a second. And then I was on hold for 2 minutes. He comes back with just 3 words. POTUS says yes. So in a very all the president's men kind of moment, we had this little drop-off spot off of Pennsylvania Avenue with 3 out-of-season sweet potato bourbon pecan pies, because I thought I made the last of them before Christmas and wouldn't do it till Thanksgiving that next year. And then that was February. A couple weeks later, we were at some Holiday Inn in Dwight's hometown in North Carolina, sitting on the sides of the bed, and the phone rang, and my cell phone says White House, and it's Cody calling again, saying, hey. And as soon as I saw that, I grabbed the Holiday Inn Express notepad and the pen that said the same thing and just started writing down exactly what he said. He says, well, first off, let me give you the president's real response to that pie. This is some good shit. I still have that pad of paper. I wrote that down on. And he said the president wants to do a nice salute to you, and he's going to release it on Pi Day 3.14, March 14th. So he said, beef up your website. I said, okay, great. Thank you very much. So we did. We rebuilt the website and much more traffic and brought in more ingredients. And Pi Day is kind of this made up thing, but it's, we embrace it. It becomes a bakery holiday. And
how were your employees? They were going to
whatever I say, they go for. I mean, they're totally engaged. They're cheerleaders. They love doing it. I must have refreshed my browser 1,000 times on Pi Day and just waiting to see what happened, and nothing happened. So at 2:30, I sent Cody a text saying, Cody, is this thing happening today on Pi Day? And he said, let me check. He writes right back. He says, yes. It's happening at 3:14 p.m. on 3/14. Oh, administration with a sense of humor. And it did, and it just went crazy. And the Post wrote a big story of how that all happened. But he wrote this whole story about, our success and how he, we stuck with his administration and how he really worked hard to keep small businesses successful. And that was one of the best moments.
That's a great moment. I love that idea that to get the attention, you send them a letter.
Yeah,
send them.
Who does that? I mean, I never thought anything happened for him.
Sometimes the simple things, and get them a pie. We need to talk about food, and we're going to have to go to questions here from you all. And we haven't even talked about. I have a quadrillion. I've read the cookbooks, and I can promise you don't read it on a 3-hour drive because you're starving at the end of it.
Especially if you're driving.
Everything will disappoint you because you haven't researched where to stop and what to eat, and it all disappoints. But the difference between this book came out first, the Farmhouse Cookbook in 2018.
Correct.
And then this one, 2022, the Farmhouse. So what are the differences?
Well, this is kind of the basic cookbook. I mean, it's everything I want to get off my chest. And here's some great things that we make at the bakery and what I learned at the CIA and what my grandmother taught me. And then on Instagram, somebody had posted a video, a woman who owns a interior design studio and bookshop outside of Seattle, as far away as you can get from our bakery. And the video was of this a woman judge in Seattle in King County, and her grown daughter, who during the pandemic cooked their way from the first page to the back cover of every single thing in here. And they just happened to mention it to this woman who at the shop. And so she interviewed them with her iPhone, and they posted it. I never heard anything about it until I saw that. And I just thought, family, comfort food, get together, bonding over food in the kitchen. I mean, these are all things she was saying. I just thought, all right, there's my pandemic project. I'm going to do a cookbook based on my farmhouse on comfort food that was handed down through, our family, or things I learned at l'Académie des Cuisines of the CIA. And so I sent a note to my agent and to my publisher, who, when you have a cookbook with Penguin, Random House, Clarkson Potter, they make you sign in the contract that you will first run anything by them, any new book project. So, I mean, what cookbook author wouldn't want to have this audience waiting for it, and they're forced by contract to look at it instead of just turn it down? And that thing was greenlighted so fast because it was just a COVID thing, and nobody had yet really started writing about COVID, and it was legit. I mean, we were holed up at our farmhouse out here and writing that. So that's what that came to be, how that came to be.
Yeah, it's incredible, full of stories. And again, your stories of places to stop and where you gleaned recipes or decided something was good.
Or stolen
recipes or modified. I just kept thinking on my car trip, where does he seek out these places?
Well, we saw at least one today. What's the name of it? Dinner. Do you know that place, Bonnie Blue? I mean, it looks like it's in one of our, the gas station where we started. And it was so sweet. We walked in 5:30. I know they were closing at 6, and they couldn't have been more cheerful. I mean, that's the kind of place where you chat them up and like, hey, do you have that recipe for your banana pudding handy? But that's, or you write them later, and you can get stuff, or just get inspired by it. But I'm sitting there thinking, I want to make a banana pudding cake. So that's on my list now.
That's on your list.
But one thing I have to say is about the cake we're eating tonight and your comment. This is called Alma Hackney's rum cake, and Dwight would go home to visit his parents in Sanford, North Carolina, and his mom would make sure that Alma Hackney's rum cake was waiting for him when he got there. Alma was the choir director, almost 90 years old or so, at the First Presbyterian Church of Sanford, North Carolina. When she made the rum cake, she would get Dwight's dad to drive her to the ABC store, where she would hunker down in the passenger side while he went into the liquor store to get the rum, because no self-respecting Presbyterian choir director could get caught there. So, it's a great cake, and that's probably the first recipe I brought to the bakery. I knew I wanted to do it. And then that kind of led to, of course, the Virginia bakery that must have a moonshine cake. So that was the second, and then bourbon cake. And the Garden and Gun magazine got a taste and referred to us as the bakery that drinks too much. Yes. But we countered with, well, it's the bakery that likes to party. And Dwight added the tagline to all of our booze cakes: eat responsibly. So this is Alma Hackney's rum cake. I made this at home because I don't have a kitchen. I sold the bakery in December of 2023. I don't know if you all know that. I hope you did. So when I heard that it was Mary Katharine's husband Don's birthday today, he's in the orange shirt, and he doesn't like attention, so don't look at him. But she said, oh, he likes carrot cake. I thought, oh, I got to make that at my house. Oh, but he also likes bourbon cake. I said, well, how about rum cake that I was planning to make? Okay, he loves that too. Okay, so we're all having his birthday cake. There were some candles around. I don't know if they're long gone. So being this primitive thing made at my house, I realized later that the nice horsehair brush that I brushed all that rum and butter and sugar icing on kind of left a few strands in the icing. I tried to pick most of those out. So don't write me a letter or call me up when you received a rum cake in Phoenix or something like has happened and saying, there's a blonde hair in my cake. And I just thought, who's in the kitchen with blonde hair? Then I realized it's these brushes that just fall apart really quick. So we'll just treat it like a king cake. So if you get a piece of the brush, you get to hold the party next year.
Yes, it's the magic. It's like the golden ticket to tour your kitchen, right?
It's homemade glory.
The question, I think, is, did the red truck go with the bakery?
Did the new owners expect that the red truck would go with the bakery? Yes. Was that part of the deal? No. So at the last minute, I dug my heels in and said, look, that red truck was with me but long before there was a bakery, and it gave its name to the bakery. And so if you want it, you got to pay for it. So, yeah, I mean, we had the pens in our hand, and I was like, no, I've mentioned this before. So it's theirs now, but at a price.
At a price. I love it. Well, I'm going to open it up to questions from you all. Baking questions, cookbook questions, the hayfields.
Yeah, I should explain that really quick, and I'll make it really short.
Let's give you a chance to explain that.
So one good thing that happens when you sell a bakery after 15 years is retirement. So we sold our house in Arlington. We had sold the bakeries. We sold the farmhouse, and we just wanted to wash our hands of all that. But we wanted to stay rural, and of all places, we needed to find a house fast that could accommodate 2 houses worth of furniture, and a friend of ours was leaving his place in Little Washington, and so we took it over. But we're right around the corner from the inn. We live right across the road from Patrick O'Connell, the chef of the inn. So it's like, so I walked by this cafe that's been long shuttered, and I joked earlier about the red truck thing. I thought, God, I'd like to turn that into a taco joint, but instead of a red truck, I might call it the Blue El Camino. And then everybody laughed, and so did I. But then I kind of, thought, well, maybe there is something to opening up that place. And it's got a restaurant. It's got a beloved bar that's very busy that the town misses. Even Patrick O'Connell told me that, look, if you open that bar, my staff will support you because there's nowhere else to go. And they're not allowed in his bar after hours. So I talked with him first. And once he knew about it, I told everybody else that, well, I'm going to take over that old cafe. And so the guy that was there left like 2 days before he was supposed to, probably at midnight, and left everything behind. But Dwight and I have been in there. We've been measuring it. Right now, we're finishing up the lease. So I let the marketing get ahead of it just to tantalize everybody. But it's called Hayfields. It's named after the rolling golden fields of hay out our way. But the first thing we have to do is clean out all the mess that got left behind. There's still French fries in the fryer from at least a year ago. That kind of gives you a clue what it's like in there. But not for long.
Lovely semi-retirement.
Yeah.
What would you tell the home baker who might be able to do what you did to look for first?
Is this to make a successful rum cake or to open up a business on a dead Main Street?
Make a cake, not a business.
Okay, first off, buy new brushes. That's on my list. I don't know. I mean, go for good ingredients. I mean, you read about it and it's true. If you're using booze, get the best booze, or within reason. Don't get budget booze. But good ingredients. Lay everything out first, as we learned at the CIA. Mise en place, everything in its place ahead of time, which is great because here's the salt, baking powder, everything, the vanilla, the rosemary if you need that, and you don't have to think, shoot, did I already add the rosemary? And no, it's sitting right there. Or the baking powder. That's the crazier thing to forget. And then it's all there organized. And then also you get to that point and you think, oh, shoot, I don't have rosemary. So you either substitute or go get some out of your yard or something instead of doing it while the batter's starting to rise. Just be organized. Don't be stupid. That should be my start. I flew home to California. I was showing my mom how to make something in a mixer, just a KitchenAid mixer. And she's kind of rolling her eyes, and we're doing it. And then she turned and left for a second, just as I reached in there to stir something. Innocently, my fingers got caught in the beaters of the still going KitchenAid. And I yelled for her. She came back in and she just looked at me and says, "Well, I've never done that."
I thought your kitchen tips
Yeah,
were
yeah.
born of your own experiences, possibly.
Yeah. I had a kid come in to interview. He wore a chef shirt from some academy somewhere, which I thought, okay, that's pretty nice to do that. I mean, he's light years ahead of anybody else that interviewed that week. And so I hired him. He came in the next day. He was making the triple chocolate cake batter. I put him on something easy. So, the rule is you always start the mixer off really slow, and it just starts grinding slowly, and then things get moist, and then you can increase it. As anybody coming into interview wearing a chef shirt should know. Instantly, there's chocolate batter everywhere, all over his face, his glasses, his nice white chef shirt. And he says, "I'm so sorry." I said, "Yeah, tell me that after you clean up every single bit of it." So he did. I gave him another chef shirt. Guess what? Same exact thing happened again. He didn't learn his lesson. So, don't be stupid. I mean, just plan things out, think about it. And please don't substitute, or at least make it, within reason, but don't. My favorite thing growing up are my grandmother's persimmon cookies. Ripe persimmons in California was great. Yes. And they're plump. They're good Christmas cookies, lots of good spices, walnuts and raisins. And it's so good. It's just like this little puffy little fruit cakey cookie. It's really great. So this woman at an event like this said, "I love your cookbook. I made your persimmon cookies. I didn't think they were as good as you say they were." I said, "Oh, did you do anything else to them?" "Well, I didn't have raisins, so I put chocolate chips in there." It's like, "Oh, that sounds probably my grandmother knocking her head underground." And I said she would have hated that. "Well, we did too," she said.
Speaking of grandmothers, as I was reading through things, and there's a fruitcake, I think it was Dwight's. Was it your mom who did the fruitcake?
Dot's icebox fruitcake.
Yes. And I was just thinking about, I'm going to bring my great-great-grandmother's fruitcake recipe. Do you get that? Where people will bring you recipes and
I love
throw
it.
the challenge down like, hey. How do you take those family recipes and adapt? Like, you talk about the Noyes birthday cake, I think, in the Farmhouse cookbook. And even a historic cake like Martha Washington's great cake.
Yeah,
it's tough to adapt those, isn't it?
Well, that was a wacky recipe. I've grown to love the people at Mount Vernon, and they love my cookbook, and they're the number one seller of the cookbook. Probably beyond the bakery, or they've surpassed that now. And I do a lot of book signings there. And I get another call, like maybe 2 months after I was last there, that we got another shipment of 40 cases if you want to sign them.
Nice.
Great. So this is Maureen Cleveland, who runs the bookstore at Mount Vernon. And she said, "You need to know about George Washington's Cherry Bounce, which is the liquor that his staff would assemble for him to take on horseback whenever he rode around." And I'm not talking about the drink. I want you to make a cake based on that. So I was thinking that'd be a pretty swell thing. She said, "Another thing is Martha's Great Cake, and it's pretty famous, but it feeds 100 or more. And so it's like, 150 eggs and a pound of something. And I think the pound was actually a pound of salt or mace or something. I mean, it was a gargantuan recipe. So we scaled it way back to modern day. And it's kind of a fruit cakey thing, but it's really good. So I think once Hayfields gets open, if it's not this Christmas, it'll be next. I want to do little miniature versions of that.
And age it for how many months, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's a question back here.
A lot of Madeira and sherry in there.
What method do you use to measure when you're putting your recipes together?
Yeah, everybody
Scale.
at home uses measuring cups, and everybody in a professional environment uses scales, and that's what we do at the bakery. And my publisher wants cups and teaspoons and tablespoons, and so I've started doing it both ways, and I've noticed more cookbooks are doing that. 1.5 cups of something / and then the weight. And the weight's the way to do it because it's always the same. I mean, liquid measuring cups are different from dry measuring cups. And it's just kind of willy-nilly in the kitchen. But to weigh it is exacting every single time. And that's why the cakes are going to turn out the same, or the bread every time.
The question is looking towards gluten-free and vegan and more healthy, less sugar, less pesticides, less bad things in our food, right?
There was a woman that came in as soon as we opened the Marshall store, and she just read me up and down because we weren't carrying Coca-Cola products. I don't want that stuff in here. But I've really embraced it. For the second cookbook, I got to know Pam Northam, our former First Lady of the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I was at an event where she was going to be, and I knew she ate gluten-free. So I had our gluten-free almond cake that I brought for her. And her advance man came by my table just maybe 10 seconds ahead of her. And I said, hey, I have a gluten-free cake for her. And he looked at me and said, well, she's also vegan. I was like, oh, God. So I dug under the tablecloth and I had a bag of our granola, and it fit all the criteria. And I gave it to her, and then I told her the story, and she laughed. And then she became good friends. She's had Dwight and I down to the executive mansion for events, and it was fun. And so we got together during the pandemic and worked via email on a gluten-free and vegan coffee cake. And we'd go back and forth on it. And then finally, she was able to tour again, and her entourage showed up at the bakery, and we made it together, and everybody loved it and got blessed. So I thought, okay, that's a nice reward. So in putting out the word in Little Washington about what I'm going to do, I said, this is going to be a little different. I know about vegan, and I know about, well, especially gluten-free. And let me know what your thoughts are and what you'd like to see, and I'll try to make it work. Lots of vegetarian options. I just heard that again today. So I'm thinking of that stuff. I mean,
I love the name of it, Flova.
Oh yeah. So I told those guys, like, man, this thing, I'm going to need a fold out because I can't say the First Lady of Virginia's vegan and gluten-free coffee cake with blueberries. And they said, just do what we do. Just call her Flova. So that's what it's called.
All right. Well, we have run out of time here. Do you want to say any last words to our audience and readers? All right. I want to thank Winchester Brew Works, WMRA.
Thank you very much.
Don't forget, it is Don's birthday, so he's got books over here to sell, and Brian will be up here. There's more cake. You got a little sample. You may need a little bit more. And thank you all so much for coming out.
But big thanks to Mary Katharine for doing all this and putting up with me.